Welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, Pat and James wonder, is the simplest pitch the best pitch? Content warning. There's a lot of silliness in this segment. We had some fun.
I don't know why we're having this conversation.
It's freezing up again.
Thank God, because this was dumb. We don't need to talk about this.
Well, I'm getting a lot of, I'm getting a lot of good insight because I always find this stuff really interesting, right? So it's like, not only do I learn more about you, but I learn more about women, right? Which love to write women characters. So it's like, I get all this insight. And I remember, I've done some interesting surveys, especially after my first surgery, because I was like, okay, does this matter? Yeah. And so I, sit and get all these funny responses. And, one woman was like, can every guy do that? And
yeah.
Because it's so, being a guy and you're hanging out with other guys, you're talking about, women, right?
Right.
One way or another. And to find out how, and I've known this, for, since I was like 8, actually before that, I was probably like 14, 15 when I figured this out. But 90% of guys are so far off base as like, it's actually kind of hysterical.
With what they think about women or with what they think women are thinking?
With what they think women are thinking.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, the big cue was like, oh, I used this, pickup line or whatever, and she was all into it. And like I asked, all these women that I knew, like, pickup lines, do they actually work? And they're like, no, we're already interested, so it doesn't matter what. Right. And since we're not looking to get married, and if you'd have to have a really shitty pickup line for somebody to say, no, go fuck off.
Yeah, it would have to be misogynistic or racist or something. Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, so the decision is already made.
Yeah.
You just have to show up.
Yeah.
And not be a jerk.
And not be an idiot. Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if we can apply that to our GU unique selling proposition. Let's see now. It's building capacity or, money, the eternal attempt to grow the income from the creative output so that life becomes a little bit more normal, because when you don't make salaried position money, like, sure, some years you're 6 figures, some years you're 5, whatever, but it's not about that. It's about the consistency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the benefits and all the paid time off. So
maybe the big fancy summary, description is unnecessary.
Description of what?
Well, if you're submitting a query or a short story or a novel or
to a
grant
woman
application, all that kind of stuff, you can get as fancy as you want, but the evaluation isn't really, that's not going to turn it.
Well, if you're submitting to a woman, do you mean? Because that's...
Well, I just mean anybody, right? Because they already know. They're like, even people who say we know it when we see it, kind of thing. Yeah. They have a sense of what they're looking for.
Yeah,
so the clearer you can be, maybe you're saving them time because they can get to a no or maybe to a yes, right? Faster.
Yeah.
And you're saving yourself time because you don't have to like try and dream up like what is the incredibly unique thing I'm gonna say in a which isn't gonna be unique, really. Yeah,
for sure. Makes me wonder why people even ask for query letters and synopses, because it's a different type of writing. Why not just ask for your first 2 pages? It'd be just as quick as reading a query letter.
Mm-hmm.
I think they want to know the shape of the story. They want to know what's the big concept. They don't want to wade through 250 or 300 pages of literary fiction with no story underneath it. And you can't tell if it's a good story from the first 2 pages. You can tell if it's well written, and you can tell if you're interested, but you can't actually tell if it pays out properly, if they've thought about it that way.
And there's no way until you read it and get 50 pages in and go, okay, this is completely lost,
Yeah.
or you just can't stop reading because you're really into the story, right?
Yeah, yeah, which makes me wonder why when I went to the Historical Novel Society conference in Portland, they had this one panel. It was actually two, it was an agent and an acquisitions editor, and they got anybody who wanted to in the audience who'd signed up for this particular breakout session could submit 2 pages of their
Mhm,
work in progress. Their first 2 pages it had to be. And so there was no query letter mediation in there. They didn't read the query and then read the first 2 pages and go, no. They read the first 2 pages and went, no, and here's why. And they already knew.
mhm,
They knew within the first page why it was a no. And sometimes it was
mhm,
just the act because it was Historical Novel Society. Sometimes it was because it was World War II and that was oversaturated.
mhm.
So it was just like that simple. So they didn't really need the query for that, but that was maybe just a bit more of a circus act than reality.
Yeah. It's like with meeting somebody at a bar, right?
Mm.
Guys don't care generally, right? It's the woman who says yes and likes me is that's the qualification, right? So women go in and they're like, I like a guy, I like bigger guys, I like thinner guys, I like taller guys,
Yeah.
I like to, da, 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 like all these kinds of, things, right? And so they have the guy with curly hair who's tall come up and they're like, no, not curly hair, tall, no.
Yeah.
You know, and then the right person comes up and it's like, yeah, okay, let's talk. So I told my son with Elliot, watching when they were younger, I said the best pickup line you can use. Or I said, I'm going to tell you the best pickup line, right? So they both roll their eyes.
Yeah.
And I say, it's this. Hello, my name is James,
Mhm.
right? That's it.
Yeah.
There's no dancing around it. So I think it's the same thing where you say, hello,
Yeah.
my book is,
Yeah. Yeah.
here's 2 pages.
Yeah.
And I think if I was an agent, the next question I would ask is tell me the unique truth that it describes or explains or something like just to get them to really.
Oh god. I mean, it works coming from you, but if I had some 25-year-old asking me what's the unique truth, I'd just get me a fucking history
Yeah,
cat, like don't
yeah,
even bother me with that shit. It's your job to read shit. Read the shit. Figure out the
yeah,
unique truth. I
yeah.
get it coming from you, but I would not take it well coming from anybody else. I'd just be, "You're not gonna be my agent. This is,"
No,
you know?
yeah, no. I mean, I try to avoid those people.
Yeah.
You see these young guys, their pictures like this or the women with the and I'm just no,
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with that. For certain projects, I'll think, yeah, that's probably a better fit because it's a long shot. But yeah, no, there's people who are under, I don't know what age I would say, 30, 35, don't have any conception of, they're figuring it out.
Yeah.
So,
For me, it's
yeah.
not just the age thing. It would be the age thing combined with that question. That would
Mhm.
like, if they were 25 and they asked a different question, then, maybe, but, like, I wouldn't rule them out just because of age, but, it would be that just because yeah, I don't think they'd understand the answer actually, and I'd have to scramble to come up with one because it's not a normal
Mhm.
question. It's not a question that people are asking right now, so it's probably just irritation on my part more than anything else.
Well, we got a little debate going here. Because I would definitely age somebody out. And if I heard some 25-year-old ask, like, see, if you're 25, that's pretentious, right? If
Yeah,
you're like the 40, 45, 50 who's
well,
got a
that's
track
more
record,
yeah,
that's like somebody who's thinking. You
yeah,
know what I mean? They're
yeah,
like, I need to know why this is important.
yeah,
It's that Richard Chemic thing here. There's an urgency to this project.
yeah. Boy, that really resonated with you, eh?
Oh, huge,
Yeah,
huge. Yeah, I love those things where you have a starting, you have a prompt, right?
yeah,
Because then it allows your subconscious to kind of jump in.
yeah, yeah. It's a good point.
Thanks for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. We'd love to hear how we're doing, so please leave a comment, join our chat page, or send us an email. Also, please hit the subscribe and or share button. It really does help. A great moral boost. Also, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and anywhere else you like to listen to podcasts. Thanks, and have an awesome day.